Welcome back to Dark Horror Stories. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 true disturbing stories from the isolated small towns of Texas. These are tales of people who ventured into forgotten corners of the Lone Star State and found something they were never meant to see. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Story 1. The town of Carrizo Springs sits in the middle of Dimmitt County, where the brush country stretches out in every direction like a sea of thorns and mesquite. My uncle left me his property there when he died, 40 acres of scrubland about 8 miles outside town, with a small ranch house he'd built himself in the 70s. I'd only been out there twice as a kid, both times in daylight, both times with my whole family around. The place always felt lonely even then, like it was holding its breath. I was 31 when I finally drove down to deal with the property. It was late October, and I'd been putting it off since July. My wife Sarah kept asking when I was going to sell it, and honestly, I didn't have a good answer. Part of me felt like I should at least see it one more time, spend a night there, sort through whatever he'd left behind. Looking back, I don't know why I thought going alone was a good idea. The drive from San Antonio took about 2 hours. The highway narrowed as I got closer, and the last 8 miles were on a caliche road that hadn't been maintained in years, potholes deep enough to swallow a tire. I passed maybe 3 other houses on the way, all of them set way back from the road, all of them looking like nobody had lived there in decades. The sun was starting to drop when I pulled up to the gate. It was already unlocked. The chain had rusted through and fallen into the tall grass. The house looked smaller than I remembered. 1-story, flat roof, faded blue paint peeling in long strips, windows dark. There was a windmill behind it that hadn't turned in years and an old stock tank that had dried to cracked mud. I parked my truck near the front steps and grabbed my overnight bag. The air smelled like dust and creosote, and it was quiet in a way that made my ears ring. No birds, no insects, just wind pushing through the brush. Inside, everything was covered in a thin layer of grit. My uncle's furniture was still there. A sagging couch, a kitchen table with 2 chairs, a bed frame in the single bedroom. The electricity was off, but I'd brought a camping lantern and some batteries. I set up in the main room, ate a sandwich I'd packed, and tried not to think about how isolated it felt. My phone had 1 bar of service, and by the time the sun went down completely, even that was gone. I told myself it was just a quiet night in the country. That's all it was supposed to be. Around 9 o'clock, I heard the first sound, a soft scraping like something dragging across the roof. I froze with my book halfway open, listening. The scraping moved from the back of the house toward the front, slow and deliberate, then it stopped. I waited maybe 5 minutes, barely breathing, but it didn't come back. Probably a branch, I thought, or an animal. Raccoons got on roofs all the time, but there weren't any trees near the house, and I hadn't seen any animals since I'd arrived. I tried to keep reading, but I couldn't focus. The lantern made shadows dance on the walls, and every small sound seemed amplified. Around 10, I heard it again, the scraping, but this time it was at the window behind me. I spun around and saw nothing but my own reflection in the glass, the darkness beyond it absolute. My mouth had gone completely dry. I stood up and walked to the window, cupping my hands against the glass to see outside. For just a second, I thought I saw something pale moving past the corner of the house. But when I blinked, it was gone. I checked the front door. Locked. I checked the back door. Locked. All the windows were latched from the inside. I was safe. I had to be safe. I sat back down on the couch and tried to convince myself I was just spooked by being alone in an unfamiliar place. My uncle had lived here for 40 years without any problems. At 11:30, I heard the voice. It came from outside, near the back of the house. A woman's voice, high and strained, calling out, "Help me. Please, somebody help me." I was on my feet instantly, heart hammering. The voice came again, closer now. "Please, I need help. Is anyone there?" I grabbed my flashlight and went to the back door, pressing my ear against it. The voice was right outside, maybe 10 feet away. "I'm hurt," it said. "Please open the door." Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to open that door, but the voice sounded so desperate, so real. I unlocked the deadbolt and turned the handle, cracking the door just a few inches. I shined my flashlight through the gap. There was nothing there. No one standing in the yard. No one anywhere near the house. Just empty scrubland stretching into darkness. Then the voice spoke again, and this time it came from directly above me from the roof, right over the door. "Please open the door." It was the exact same words, the exact same inflection, like a recording being played back. I slammed the door shut and locked it, stumbling backward into the kitchen table. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the flashlight. The voice went quiet. I stood there in the dark, listening to my own ragged breathing, waiting for it to come back. It didn't speak again, but for the next 3 hours I heard footsteps, slow, measured footsteps circling the house. They moved around the perimeter, from the back to the side, from the side to the front, from the front around to the back again, over and over. The footsteps never rushed, never stopped, never varied their rhythm, and they were heavy. Whatever was making them weighed more than any person should. I sat on the couch with the lantern turned low, watching the windows, gripping a kitchen knife I'd found in one of the drawers. I kept telling myself to just wait for sunrise, just make it to sunrise and I could leave. I checked my phone every few minutes. 12:47, 1:23, 2:15. Time felt like it was moving through molasses. At 3:08, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I could feel something out there, waiting, watching the house. I didn't move, I barely breathed. Then I heard the scraping again, but this time it wasn't on the roof. It was on the front door, long, slow drags like fingernails being pulled down the wood. The sound went on for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. In the quiet that followed, I heard something else, a wet, clicking sound like joints popping. The door handle started to turn. I'd locked it. I knew I'd locked it, but the handle was turning anyway, slowly testing the resistance. When it reached its full rotation, there was a pause. Then something pressed against the door from outside, not a knock, a sustained pressure like a body leaning its full weight against the wood. The door groaned in its frame. I stood up, gripping the knife, backing toward the bedroom. The pressure stopped. For maybe 10 seconds, everything was silent. Then I heard footsteps again, moving away from the front door, around the side of the house, toward the bedroom window. I ran into the bedroom and pressed myself against the wall beside the window. The footsteps stopped right outside. I could hear breathing, slow, ragged breathing. Then the scraping started on the window glass, not scratching, something harder like bone being dragged across the pane. I couldn't help it. I looked. There was a hand pressed against the glass. Pale, impossibly long fingers spread wide, each joint bent at a wrong angle. The hand was attached to an arm that disappeared into the darkness beyond my flashlight's range. As I watched, frozen, the hand slowly dragged downward, leaving no mark on the glass. Then it lifted away and was gone. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor in the corner of the bedroom, knife in my lap, watching the window until the sky started to turn gray. The sounds didn't come back after that hand, but I knew something was still out there, just beyond the walls, waiting to see what I would do. The moment there was enough light to see by, I grabbed my bag and ran for the truck. I didn't look at the house. I didn't look at the brush around it. I just got in, started the engine, and drove. The gate was open when I reached it, though I didn't remember opening it on my way in. I didn't stop until I was back on the highway. I sold the property through a realtor 3 weeks later. Never went back. But sometimes, late at night when Sarah's asleep and the house is quiet, I think about that hand on the window, about how the fingers were too long, how they bent in too many places, about how when it dragged down the glass, I could see through the gaps between the fingers into the darkness beyond. And in that darkness, I swear I saw more hands, dozens of them, all reaching toward the window, all wanting to get in. Story 2. Marfa's one of those towns people pass through on their way to somewhere else. About 1,800 people sitting out in the high desert of West Texas where the sky goes on forever and the land is all flat scrub dotted with creosote. I moved there in 2019 to work as a wildlife surveyor for the state, tracking mule deer populations and checking water sources. It was good work, lonely but good. I spent most of my days driving dirt roads and hiking transects through the rangeland with my GPS and my field notes. There's a spot about 20 miles northeast of town where an old ranch road cuts through a section of BLM land. Dead ends at a dried-up stock tank. I'd been out that way maybe 4 times over the summer, never saw anything unusual. Just pronghorn, some javelina, the occasional coyote. The road had been washed out in places by flash floods, but my truck could handle it. I always went in the early morning when it was cool, before the heat got unbearable. It was mid-August when I decided to check that area again. I'd gotten a report from a rancher about possible lion activity, tracks near his water troughs, a calf that went missing. He thought maybe they were coming from the public land. I figured I'd spend the day out there, set up a camera trap, see what turned up. I told my roommate Carlos I'd be back by dinner. Routine survey work. Nothing I hadn't done 100 times. The drive out was normal. Even at 7 in the morning. The road was rougher than I remembered, but I took it slow. I parked near the stock tank around 8 and started setting up my equipment. The tank itself was bone dry, just cracked earth and a few scattered cattle bones from decades ago. There was a windmill nearby, rusted solid, and a stretch of barbed wire fence that had mostly collapsed. The nearest occupied ranch was at least 6 miles south. I was kneeling down, adjusting the angle on my camera when I found the first one. A circle of rocks, maybe 3 feet across, arranged in the dirt about 20 yards from the tank, perfectly circular. The rocks were smooth river stones, the kind you don't find naturally out here. Someone had brought them in, placed them deliberately. In the center of the circle was a piece of rebar driven straight down into the ground, about 2 feet of it sticking up. I stood there looking at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It wasn't a survey marker, wrong type of marker, wrong location, wasn't a property boundary. I walked around it slowly, taking photos with my phone. That's when I saw the second one about 30 yards to the west. Same setup. Smooth stones in a perfect circle, rebar in the center. Then I saw the third one and the fourth. They formed a line stretching north from the stock tank, disappearing over a low rise in the terrain. All identical, all perfectly spaced. I followed them, counting. There were 9 in total, running in a straight line for maybe 200 yards. The last one sat at the edge of a shallow arroyo where winter runoff carved through the caliche. I'm not superstitious, but standing there looking at those circles, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. They'd been there for a while. Dirt had blown into the gaps between the stones, and the rebar had oxidation on it, but not so long that the circles had been disturbed by animals or weather. Maybe a few months, maybe longer. I told myself it was probably some weird art project. Marfa got a lot of that, artists coming out to the desert, doing installations, or maybe it was some kind of land survey I didn't understand. But even as I thought it, I knew that didn't make sense. This land wasn't near anything, wasn't being developed. There was no reason for anyone to be out here doing anything. I decided to check beyond the arroyo, see if the line continued. I climbed down into the wash and up the other side. The ground was harder here, more rock than dirt. I walked about 50 yards, scanning for more circles, but didn't find any. The line ended at the arroyo, that was it. I was about to turn back when I saw the boot print. It was in a patch of soft sand near a creosote bush, perfectly preserved, fresh maybe from that morning or the night before. A work boot, size 10 or 11, the tread pattern clear. The strange part was that there was only one print. I looked around it carefully, searching for where the person had walked from, where they'd walked to, but there was nothing. Just that single print sitting there in the sand like someone had teleported in, taken one step and vanished. My skin started to prickle. I took a photo and started walking back toward my truck, moving faster now. I didn't like how quiet it was. I hadn't noticed before, but there were no birds, no insects buzzing, just the wind and the sound of my own footsteps. I was halfway back to the stock tank when I heard it. A voice carried on the wind, calling out a name. "Michael, Michael, where are you?" I stopped dead. That was my name, but the voice wasn't familiar. It was thin, distant, like it was coming from miles away. I turned slowly, trying to locate the source. The voice came again from the direction of the arroyo. "Michael, I need you to come here." Every part of me wanted to run, but I stood there, frozen, listening. The voice came a third time, and this time it was closer, much closer, right behind me. "Michael, turn around." I spun around. There was nothing there, just empty desert and the line of stone circles stretching toward the stock tank. But now I could see something I'd missed before. In the center of each circle, driven onto the rebar, was a piece of cloth. Faded, sun-bleached, fluttering in the wind. They looked like strips torn from shirts, or flags, or something else I didn't want to think about. I ran straight back to my truck, not looking behind me, my field bag bouncing against my hip. I could hear the voice following me, calling my name over and over, sometimes close, sometimes far away. It never sounded angry, just patient, like it had all the time in the world. I reached the truck and fumbled with my keys, hands shaking. The voice had stopped. I looked back at the stock tank, at the line of circles leading away from it, and standing next to the nearest circle, maybe 40 yards away, was a figure. Tall, thin, wearing something dark that hung off its frame like wet cloth. It wasn't moving, just standing there facing me. I couldn't see any features. The sun was behind it, turning it into a silhouette, but I could feel it watching me. I got in the truck and started the engine. Didn't look back again. Just drove as fast as the rough road would allow, hitting potholes hard enough to make my teeth click together. I didn't slow down until I hit the highway. That night I developed the photos on my phone. Most of them were normal, the stone circles, the rebar, the boot print. But in the last photo, the one I'd taken looking back at the stock tank, I could see the figure. It was closer in the photo than it had been when I took it, close enough that I could see its arms. They were too long, hanging down past its knees, and where its hand should have been, there was something else. Something that looked like the cloth strips on the rebar, but longer, moving in the wind even though everything else in the photo was still. I reported the circles to my supervisor, said I'd found some kind of weird marker system and didn't feel comfortable going back alone. He sent another surveyor out there 2 weeks later with a deputy. They found the stock tank, they found the windmill, but they didn't find any stone circles, didn't find any rebar. The other surveyor said the area was completely clear, just normal desert scrub. I still have the photos. I look at them sometimes, trying to convince myself I didn't imagine it. The circles are there, the boot print is there. And in that last photo, standing closer than it should be, that figure is there too. I zoom in on it sometimes, trying to see its face, but there's nothing where a face should be. Just a smooth, pale oval, tilted slightly to the side, like it was trying to figure out what I was. The same way I was trying to figure out what it was. Story 3. I grew up in Alpine, which is this small college town tucked against the Davis Mountains in the Big Bend region. My grandmother owned a house on the north edge of town, right where the residential area gave way to ranch land and open desert. She'd lived there since the 60s, raised my dad and his 2 brothers in that house. It was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a screened porch that faced the mountains. She died in February, and since I was between jobs and living in El Paso, I volunteered to spend a week at the house clearing it out before we sold it. My cousin Jenna was supposed to help me, but her kids got sick, so it ended up being just me. I drove down on a Sunday, stopped at the grocery store for supplies, and got to the house around 4 in the afternoon. The place felt frozen in time. Same furniture, same wallpaper, same smell of chamomile and old wood. I spent the first evening just walking through it, touching things, remembering summers I'd spent there as a kid. The backyard butted up against a barbed wire fence, and beyond that was nothing but rangeland for miles. When I was young, my grandmother used to tell me never to go past that fence. She said it wasn't our property, and the rancher who owned it didn't like trespassers. But there was something in the way she said it that made me think it was more than that. Like she wasn't just worried about property lines. She'd watch the back window sometimes in the evening, staring out at the desert, and I'd ask her what she was looking at. She'd always say, "Nothing, Mija," but her face would be tight, worried. I'd mostly forgotten about that until the second night I was there. I'd been packing boxes all day, kitchen stuff, books, old photos, and I was exhausted. I made myself dinner and sat on the back porch to eat, watching the sun set behind the mountains. It was beautiful, peaceful, the kind of quiet that feels good after a long day of work. When it got full dark, I went inside and locked up. I was in the bedroom sorting through my grandmother's closet when I heard it. A rhythmic thumping sound, like someone knocking on wood. It was coming from the back of the house. I walked into the kitchen and stood there listening. The sound came again, 3 slow knocks, then a pause, then 3 more knocks. It was coming from the back door. I walked over and looked through the window. The porch light was on, illuminating the screened porch and a few feet of the backyard beyond. I didn't see anyone. The knocking came again, and this time I realized it wasn't coming from the door itself. It was coming from the fence post at the back of the yard, maybe 30 feet away. Someone was hitting the post with something, making it ring out in the quiet. I opened the back door and stepped onto the porch, squinting into the darkness. "Hello," I called out. "Is someone there?" The knocking stopped. For a long moment, there was just silence. Then I heard footsteps, not from the backyard, but from the side of the house. Slow footsteps moving along the gravel driveway toward the front. I hurried back inside and went to the living room window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to see out. There was someone standing in the driveway, a woman I thought, though it was hard to tell in the dark. She was just standing there, facing the house, about 20 feet from the front door, not moving, not making any sound. She was wearing something pale, a dress maybe, or a nightgown, and her hair hung down past her shoulders. I let the curtain fall and stepped back from the window. My heart was going fast. Maybe it was a neighbor, I thought. Maybe someone checking on the house, seeing lights on and wanting to make sure everything was okay. But then why had she been knocking on the fence post? Why was she just standing there? I waited maybe 2 minutes, then checked the window again. She was closer now. Maybe 10 feet from the front door, still not moving, just standing there. In the glow from the porch light, I could see her dress more clearly. It was filthy, stained dark around the hem, and her face, I couldn't see her face. Her hair hung down over it, curtaining it completely. I locked the front door and backed away. "What do you want?" I called out, loud enough that she'd hear me through the door. "This is private property." No response. I went to the window one more time. She was right at the edge of the porch now, 1 foot on the first step. Her head was tilted down like she was looking at the ground. Then, slowly, she started to raise it. I saw her chin first, then her mouth. Then, I yanked the curtain closed and stumbled backward, knocking into the coffee table. My breath was coming in short gasps. There was something wrong with her face. The proportions weren't right. Her mouth was too wide, stretching almost ear to ear. And her skin had this waxy, stretched look like it didn't quite fit. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The dispatcher answered on the second ring, and I tried to explain what was happening. There was someone on my property, someone who wouldn't leave, someone who looked wrong. The dispatcher stayed calm, asked for my address, said she'd send a deputy out. It would be about 15 minutes. Those were the longest 15 minutes of my life. I sat on the couch with all the lights on, phone in my hand, listening. I could hear her moving on the porch, footsteps creaking on the wood. She walked from one side to the other, then back again. Then the footsteps stopped and I heard something else, a wet, dragging sound like something being pulled across the porch floor. Then she started knocking, not on the door, on the living room window right behind me. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just sat there frozen while she knocked. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks, over and over, and under the knocking I could hear something else. Breathing, wet, labored breathing right on the other side of the glass. When I finally heard the deputy's cruiser pull up, I almost cried with relief. I ran to the door and opened it just as he was getting out of his vehicle. "She's here," I said. "She's on the porch, she's—" But when he walked around to the side of the house with his flashlight, there was no one there. The porch was empty. He checked the backyard, checked the driveway, even walked out to the fence line. No sign of anyone. He asked me what she looked like and I tried to describe her. The pale dress, the long hair, the wrong mouth. He nodded, writing it down, but I could see he didn't believe me. After he left, I packed a bag and drove back to El Paso that same night. I couldn't stay in that house. My dad hired someone else to finish clearing it out. I never told him exactly why I left. Just said I wasn't comfortable there alone. But a few weeks later, I was going through a box of my grandmother's things and found an old photo album. Most of the pictures were from the 70s and 80s, family gatherings, birthdays, holidays. But near the back, tucked into a sleeve by itself, was a Polaroid I'd never seen before. It showed the backyard of the house at night. The porch light was on and you could see the fence in the background. And standing just beyond the fence, half hidden in the darkness, was a pale figure in a long dress. The photo was dated 1983. The handwriting on the back, in my grandmother's careful script, said, "She came back again, don't go past the fence." I burned that photo. But sometimes late at night I still hear that knocking in my head. 3 slow knocks. Pause, 3 slow knocks, and I wonder what would have happened if I'd opened the door, if I'd let her in, if that's even what she wanted. Story 4. Van Horn sits at the crossroads of I-10 and Highway 54, a tiny town that mostly exists to provide gas and food to people driving between El Paso and San Antonio. Population maybe 2,000 on a good day. I worked there for 6 months as a contract electrician, helping upgrade the infrastructure at a truck stop just off the interstate. It was boring work, but it paid well, and I had a little apartment above a taqueria on the main street. The owner of the building, an older man named Ruben Esparza, told me not to go into the basement. He said it when I first moved in, casual like he was telling me where the trash bins were. "The basement door is in the back hallway," he said. "Don't open it, don't go down there, it's not safe." I figured he meant the structure was unstable or there was black mold or something. I didn't think much about it. The apartment was furnished, clean, cheap. I could hear the taqueria below me during the day, music, conversations in Spanish, the smell of carne asada drifting up through the floorboards. It was actually kind of comforting. I'd been there maybe 3 weeks when I started hearing the sounds at night, scraping noises coming from below, not from the taqueria. They closed at 9 and these sounds came later, around midnight or 1 in the morning. A rhythmic scraping, like something being dragged across concrete. It would go on for maybe 10 minutes, then stop, then start again an hour later. I asked Ruben about it one morning when I was paying rent. He looked uncomfortable. "Old building," he said, "pipes settling, you know how it is." But I'd worked construction long enough to know what pipes sounded like. This wasn't that. This was something heavy being moved, pulled across the floor in short, lurching movements. One night, it was a Thursday, I remember, because I'd just gotten paid. I couldn't sleep. The scraping had been going on for over an hour, stopping and starting. It was driving me crazy. I got out of bed and stood in the hallway outside my apartment listening. The sound was definitely coming from below, from the direction of that basement door. I walked down to the back hallway. It was narrow, poorly lit, smelling of dust and old cooking grease. The basement door was at the end, painted green, with a simple handle and a deadbolt lock. As I stood there, the scraping sound came again, loud enough that I could feel it through the floor. Then it stopped. Silence. Then very faintly I heard something else. A voice, low, mumbling like someone talking to themselves. I couldn't make out words, just the rhythm of speech. I know I should have left it alone, but I was curious, and maybe a little annoyed. If there was someone down there, a squatter or something, I had a right to know. It was where I lived. I tried the door handle. Locked. But the voice was still going, that low mumble, rising and falling. I knocked on the door. "Hello, is someone down there?" The voice stopped immediately. The silence that followed felt wrong, too complete. I knocked again. "This is private property. You need to leave." Something knocked back, not on the door, from inside the wall beside me. 3 sharp raps right at ear level, then 3 more a foot lower, then 3 more at floor level, like something was moving down inside the wall, knocking as it went. I backed away, my skin crawling. The knocking stopped when it reached the floor, then I heard it again, under the floorboards now, moving away from the door, deeper into the basement. And with it came that scraping sound, faster now, urgent. I went back to my apartment and locked myself in. Didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning I confronted Ruben, told him what I'd heard. He listened quietly, then shook his head. "I told you not to go near that door." "Is there someone living down there?" I asked. "Because if there is—" "No one's living down there," he said, his voice firm. "No one's been down there in 5 years, and no one should go down there. I'm telling you this for your own good, Tyler." "Then what's making those sounds?" He looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. "My brother," he said finally. "He owned this building before me. He went down there one night because he heard the same sounds you're hearing. We found him 3 days later, sitting at the bottom of the stairs. He wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat, wouldn't move, just sat there staring at the wall. We had to carry him out." "What was down there?" I asked. "He never said, but after we got him to the hospital, he managed to write something down." Ruben pulled out his wallet and showed me a folded piece of paper. In shaky handwriting it said, "It knows my name now, don't let it learn yours." I should have moved out right then. But I was broke and I'd already paid first and last month's rent. I figured if I just stayed away from that door, kept to myself, I'd be fine. People hear weird sounds in old buildings all the time. It didn't mean anything. But that night the sounds changed. Instead of scraping, I heard footsteps, climbing stairs, the stairs that led from the basement to the back hallway. Slow, heavy footsteps, one after another. I lay in bed, paralyzed, listening to them ascend. Then they reached the top and stopped. For maybe 30 seconds there was silence. Then I heard my name, Tyler. It came from the hallway, right outside my apartment door. A man's voice, flat and emotionless. "Tyler, open the door." I didn't move, didn't breathe. The voice came again. "Tyler, I need to show you something. Open the door." I lay there for what felt like hours, listening to that voice repeat my name. It never got louder, never got angry, just patient, persistent. Between repetitions, I could hear breathing. Wet, raspy breathing. When the sun finally came up, the voice stopped. I packed my things and left that morning, forfeiting my rent. Ruben didn't try to stop me, just nodded when I handed him the keys like he'd been expecting it. I found a motel on the edge of town and stayed there for the rest of my contract. But on my last day in Van Horn, I drove past the taqueria one more time. The building looked normal in the daylight. People were going in and out, ordering food. But I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Above the door to the back hallway, someone had painted over a sign. You could still see the outline of the letters underneath the paint. It had said, "Chapel." The building used to be a church. And that basement, That was where they'd kept the dead back before the town had a proper morgue. A place to prepare bodies before burial. A place where the walls had listened to decades of prayers and grief and final goodbyes. And maybe, just maybe, a place where something learned to mimic the voices it heard. To call out names. To wait at the top of the stairs, patient and hungry, for someone to finally open the door. Story 5. I spent a summer working for the Parks and Wildlife Department near Balmorhea, which is this tiny town in Reeves County built around a massive spring-fed pool. My job was to maintain the trails and campgrounds at Balmorhea State Park and the surrounding recreation areas. It was good work, hot but good. I stayed in a little trailer the park provided, and most days I had the place pretty much to myself. There's a network of abandoned irrigation canals north of town, built back in the 20s to bring water from the springs to farms that never really took off. The desert reclaimed most of it decades ago, but the concrete canals are still there, cutting through the scrubland in straight lines. Some of them are 10 feet deep. Most are empty now, but a few still carry water from underground seeps. They're not technically part of the park system, but I was supposed to check them periodically for safety issues. Kids like to explore them sometimes, and the Park Service didn't want anyone getting hurt. It was early July when I hiked out to check the northern section. I'd brought plenty of water, a first aid kit, my radio, all the usual gear. The canals in that area formed a grid pattern, connecting and branching off at concrete junction boxes. Some of the channels were shallow enough to walk through easily. Others required climbing down with a rope. I was about 2 miles from the main road when I found the shrine. It was set up in one of the junction boxes, in a dry channel that looked like it hadn't carried water in years. Someone had arranged a collection of objects on the concrete floor, white candles in glass jars, a rosary, several crosses made from mesquite branches, and photographs. Lots of photographs. They were all of the same person, a young woman with dark hair smiling in different settings. Beach photos, birthday parties, graduation pictures. In the center of the shrine was a name written in black marker on the concrete, Isabella Cortez, and below that a date, August 12, 2018. I stood there looking at it, trying to decide what to do. It clearly meant something to someone, a memorial for a lost loved one probably. But it seemed strange to put it way out here, miles from anywhere. I took some photos with my phone, thinking I'd ask around town, see if anyone knew the story. That's when I noticed the footprints. They led away from the shrine deeper into the canal system, fresh footprints left in the thin layer of silt that covered the concrete. Barefoot, small like a woman's feet. They headed north into a section of canal I hadn't explored yet, disappearing around a bend maybe 30 yards away. I followed them. I don't know why, curiosity maybe, or concern that someone was out here without proper shoes. The prints were evenly spaced, purposeful, not wandering. The person who made them had been walking with intention, heading somewhere specific. The canal curved to the right and the walls got higher. I had to duck under a collapsed section of rebar and concrete. The footprints continued, leading me deeper. After about 10 minutes of walking, the canal opened into a large circular basin, probably a holding tank of some kind. The walls were at least 15 feet high here, sheer concrete covered in old water stains. The footprints ended in the center of the basin, just stopped like whoever made them had vanished into thin air. I stood there looking at them, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. No scuff marks, no indication they'd turned around. Just 2 clear prints, then nothing. That's when I heard the voice. A woman's voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Thank you for coming." I spun around looking for the source. The basin was empty. The voice came again from all around me. "I've been waiting so long." "Who's there?" I called out. My voice bounced back at me, distorted. "Where are you?" "I'm here," the voice said. "I'm right here with you." I felt something touch my shoulder, a light pressure like fingers resting there. I jerked away, stumbling, and turned to look. There was nothing behind me, but now I could feel it again on my other shoulder, and then on my back. Light touches moving across my body like invisible hands exploring. I ran, scrambled up the wall of the basin using old maintenance rungs that had been bolted into the concrete. I hauled myself over the edge and didn't stop running until I was out of the canal system completely. Back in open desert. My hands were bleeding from scraping against the concrete and my lungs were burning, but I didn't stop until I could see my truck in the distance. I drove straight back to the park office and told my supervisor what I'd found. He listened quietly, then pulled up a database on his computer. Isabella Cortez, age 23, went missing from Bamoria on August 12, 2018. Last seen heading toward the old canal system. Search teams combed the area for weeks but never found her. Case went cold. Most people assumed she'd gotten lost and died of exposure and her body was just never recovered. But here's the thing. 2 weeks after I found that shrine, a group of hikers reported finding human remains in a different section of the canals, about 5 miles from where I'd been. The medical examiner confirmed it was Isabella. She'd fallen into one of the deep channels and broken her neck. Been there for 5 years. I should have been relieved, I guess. Closure for the family. But I kept thinking about those footprints. They were fresh, made recently, not 5 years ago, and I kept thinking about that voice, about those touches, about how the footprints ended in the center of the basin, like she just walked out into the air. 3 months later, I was packing up my trailer to head back to Austin when I found something on the front step, a photograph. It showed me standing in that circular basin, looking around with a confused expression on my face. Someone had taken it from above, from the rim of the basin. But I'd been alone that day. No one else was out there with me. I turned the photo over. On the back, in neat handwriting, were 3 words, "Thank you, Ethan." That was my name, but I'd never told anyone my name out in those canals. Never spoken it aloud. And the woman's voice, Isabella's voice, had never asked for it. So how did she know? Story 6. Sanderson is about as isolated as a town can get in Texas. It sits in Terrell County, which has maybe 900 people spread across 2,400 square miles. The town itself is just a handful of buildings along Highway 90, serving ranchers and border patrol agents and travelers passing through. I ended up there by accident. My car broke down on the way to Del Rio, and the mechanic said he'd need 3 days to get parts. The only motel in town was called the Desert Rose, and it was about as depressing as it sounds. The woman who ran the place, Patricia Hoffman, was friendly enough. She showed me to a room on the ground floor, explained the Wi-Fi password didn't work most of the time, and told me the diner next door had decent breakfast. As I was unpacking, she mentioned something that stuck with me. "If you hear anyone in the courtyard at night, don't worry about it, just ignore it." I asked what she meant, and she just smiled. "Old building, sound carries weird. People think they hear things. It's nothing." The motel was arranged in a U-shape around a central courtyard with a dry fountain and some dead plants. My room faced the courtyard, and the window had these thin curtains that didn't close all the way. I grabbed dinner at the diner, watched some TV, and fell asleep around 10. I woke up at 2:47 a.m. to the sound of splashing water. I lay there for a minute, disoriented, trying to figure out where it was coming from. Then I remembered the fountain in the courtyard. But that fountain was dry, bone dry. The cement was cracked and filled with blown-in sand. I got up and looked through the gap in the curtains. The courtyard was lit by a single yellow bulb above the motel office door. And the fountain was full of water, dark water rippling in the still night air. As I watched, someone walked into view. A man dressed in old-fashioned clothes, slacks, a white shirt, suspenders. He stopped at the edge of the fountain and knelt down, cupping his hands to drink. I blinked and he was gone. The fountain was dry again, just cracked cement and sand. I told myself I'd been dreaming, sleepwalking with my eyes open or something. I went back to bed, but I couldn't shake the image of that man, the way he'd moved, stiff, wrong, like a film played at the wrong speed. The next morning I asked Patricia about the fountain. She got quiet for a moment, then sighed. That fountain hasn't had water in it since 1974. There was a drowning, a little boy. After that happened, my father-in-law had it drained and sealed, but people still, well, they see things sometimes. Like what? I asked. Like the boy, she said. Like his father looking for him, like the other guests who stayed here over the years and never checked out. She said it matter of fact, like she was talking about plumbing problems. I decided to stay in my room that night. Didn't go near the window. But around midnight, I heard a knock on my door, 3 soft taps. I looked through the peephole and saw someone standing there, a woman in a blue dress, her face turned away from the door. "Yes," I called through the door. "Can I help you?" She didn't answer, just stood there. I watched her through the peephole for maybe 30 seconds, then she slowly turned her head toward the door. Her face was wrong. Blurred like a photograph taken with a shaking hand. The features kept shifting, never quite settling into place. She raised her hand and knocked again, 3 soft taps. Then she leaned in close to the peephole and I saw her mouth open, too wide, impossibly wide, and she whispered something I couldn't quite hear through the door. I backed away and sat on the bed, heart hammering. The knocking came again and again. Always 3 soft taps, always patient. It went on for over an hour. I called the front desk, but no one answered. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? There's a woman with a blurry face knocking on my door. Finally, around 2 in the morning, the knocking stopped. I waited another hour, then carefully looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I opened the door just a crack and looked out. Nothing, no one, but the carpet in front of my door was wet. Soaking wet, like someone had poured gallons of water there, and in that wet carpet I could see footprints. Small footprints like a child's. They led from my door across the courtyard to the fountain. I packed my things and slept in my car for the rest of the night, parked at a rest stop 20 miles down the highway. The next morning I went back to get my car from the mechanic. He said the part had come in early and it was already fixed. Pure luck, he said. I didn't go back to the motel for my deposit. Didn't want to see Patricia again. Didn't want to know what she might tell me about the woman in the blue dress or the wet footprints. But as I drove out of town, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw someone standing in the middle of the highway behind me. A woman in a blue dress, perfectly still, watching my car disappear into the distance. I blinked and she was gone. The thing that bothers me most isn't what I saw. It's what I found in my jacket pocket 3 days later, back home in San Antonio. A room key from the Desert Rose Motel. Room 14. I'd stayed in room 8. I never went inside room 14. I don't even know where it was in that motel, but somehow I ended up with the key. And sometimes, late at night, I hold that key in my hand and wonder what would have happened if I'd used it. If I'd opened the door to room 14 and looked inside, but I don't think I want to know. Story 7. Fort Davis sits high in the Davis Mountains, about 40 miles north of Presidio. It's a beautiful town, old stone buildings, cool mountain air, dark skies, perfect for stargazing. I went there in October to do some rock climbing with my friend Natalie Bowman and her boyfriend Cyrus. We planned to spend 3 days climbing in the McDonald Observatory area, camping at a primitive site near the base of Mount Fawkes. The first 2 days were perfect. Clear skies, good climbs, no problems. But on the 3rd night, Cyrus got food poisoning from something he ate and had to hike back to the car. Natalie wanted to go with him, but I said I'd be fine staying at the campsite alone. We were only about 2 miles from the parking area and I had my phone. I'd pack up in the morning and meet them back in town. I watched them hike out as the sun set, their headlamps bobbing through the juniper trees. Then I was alone. The silence that settled over the mountains after they left felt profound, almost physical. No wind, no birds, just the faint crackle of my campfire. I was sitting there staring into the flames when I heard it, a sound like metal scraping against rock. It came from up the slope, maybe 100 yards above my camp. I stood up and shined my flashlight in that direction, but didn't see anything. The scraping came again, closer now. A rhythmic sound, like something heavy being dragged. I called out, "Hello, is someone there?" No answer. The scraping stopped. I waited, listening, my hand tight on the flashlight. Then I heard footsteps, not animal footsteps. These were bipedal, deliberate, coming down the slope toward me. I couldn't see anyone in the beam of my flashlight, but I could hear them, closer and closer. The footsteps stopped maybe 30 feet away, just beyond the edge of my firelight. I heard breathing, slow, rasping breaths. Then a voice. "You shouldn't be here." It was a man's voice, hoarse, strained. "This is Forest Service land," I said, trying to sound confident. "I have a permit to camp here." "You shouldn't be here," the voice repeated. Exactly the same inflection, like a recording. I backed toward my tent, keeping my flashlight trained on the darkness. "I'm not looking for trouble. I'll leave in the morning." The breathing got louder, and then I saw it, a shape moving at the edge of my firelight, tall, hunched forward, moving with a strange, jerking gait. Its arms hung down too far, knuckles almost dragging the ground, and its head was tilted at an angle that made my stomach turn, like the neck was broken. It took a step into the firelight, and I saw its face. Pale, sunken, mouth hanging open, eyes that didn't blink. It stared at me with those dead eyes and said again, "You shouldn't be here." I ran, grabbed my pack and ran straight down the trail, crashing through the brush, not caring about the noise I made. Behind me I could hear it following. That scraping sound, those dragging footsteps getting faster. I didn't look back, just ran as hard as I could. I made it to the parking area in maybe 20 minutes, my lungs screaming, legs shaking. Natalie and Cyrus were waiting by the car, and when they saw me stumble out of the darkness, they rushed over. I couldn't speak, just pointed back at the trail. We drove straight to the ranger station and reported what happened. They took it seriously, sent a search team up there the next morning, but they didn't find anything. No footprints, no signs of anyone camping or living in that area. They said it was probably just a confused hiker or maybe a coyote, but I know what I saw, and I know what I found in my pack when I got home. Wedged into the outside pocket, something I hadn't put there. A piece of bone, smooth, yellowed with age, and carved into it, in tiny, careful letters, "Leave." I don't know when it was put there, I don't know how, but sometimes I take it out and look at it, running my finger over those carved letters, and I think about that shape in the firelight with its broken neck and its dead eyes. I think about how it knew I shouldn't be there, and I wonder how many others it warned, how many listened, and how many didn't. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments which story unsettled you most, and share this with your friends who love a good scare. Until next time, stay safe out there.